company with a pearl. Used to call her my dear girl. Spent my money on her, you see, and I thought that she'd marry me. When I lost my job one day, she said goodbye on your way. Now she's got another beau, a friend of mine with lots of dough. Somebody else is getting it right where his collar ought to be. Somebody else is getting it right where the chicken got the A-X-E. Somebody else thinks.
Hello Space Engineers, welcome back to Hephaestus Prime, Wellington 6012 here. How's everybody doing today? Hope you're all well. I'm certainly good today. So here we are at the location for our permanent base and ready to get digging, which will be the main focus of today. Building some sort of tunnel boring machine which will allow me access under the mountain. Once under there I'll be able to create some large cabin to act as a hangar, which amongst other vehicles will store the beast under there, nice and safe. From that area I will be able to have various other subterranean production facilities, accommodation and all those sorts of things. So quite a large scale base. I don't expect it to be small whatsoever. Before we get into that, it is middle of the night and the weather's pretty atrocious outside, so I thought I might just take this opportunity to give you a little bit of a roadmap about how I sort of want the series to go and some of the things that I'm intending to do. Chapter 1 is all complete. We started way back in episode 1 with practically nothing, laid down the foundation for the beast, and here we are some 18-19 episodes later with this completed vehicle here at our new base location, and quite a journey it was too. So chapter 2 we're going to get into this subterranean base, and then at some stage we'll need to start thinking about getting into space to get some more resources, mainly platinum and uranium. I'm only going to have quite a small space presence, so I'm thinking just along the lines of a suborbital platform. Now that'll mostly be fabricated on the ground I think, and I'll fly it up. One of the things that I will do with it is install a safe zone generator on it, which is why I've been quite keen on doing a bit of trading with the trading posts and getting that bank account up so I can buy some zone chips to firstly build and sort of the ongoing fuel for it. Now the suborbital base will be a stepping stone, like a fueling dock, to allow me to get to the moon, and on the moon I will be doing some mining and then ferrying what I produced back to Hephaestus Prime, and then looking at the next chapter, which would be building a ship that can get me to Mars. Now a couple of limitations that I'm putting on my game is that there aren't any asteroids, so my mining will have to be on the moon for the platinum and the uranium. Also I'm not going to use any jump drives, so it'll be the slow trip to the moon and all the risks that entails. And when I eventually get to Mars, it'll probably be a case of I'm going to build a ship that I will hibernate in and just point it in the direction and press go, and then I might finish Hephaestus Prime there and sort of have season 2 on the red planet. So that's just a basic outline of what I'm intending to do. First things first, let's get this base underway. Well, maybe in the morning when it's stopped raining. Wow, that intro was just such a long time ago now. Future Wellington 6012 here. I've completed the drill and it's just churning away, getting into the hill. It's doing a good job and really happy with how it's turned out, but it's been an absolute roller coaster and rocky ride to get there. I have lost an entire weekend trying to get it working and then some. I've had several versions, and what I've done is I think I've got the footage from the latest version, the one that actually works, so I'm gonna have to chop and change and edit, because even then that didn't go quite right. So hopefully I get the continuity right, but if you see some odd things happen, that's probably what's going on with the old edit. I'm gonna have to chop heaps of it out because it took such a long time to build. I'll sort of talk through what I'm doing as I'm doing it on screen here and just go over some of the problems that I had, because they're all good learnings. None of it was really my fault. It was all game bugs and just stuff not quite happening, the physics engine not letting me do stuff. Now I'm just starting off this version with a base plate type thing. The drill head itself, now I tried once sort of midway through using, I guess, fixed drill heads on it. Well, I'm using pistons to push a drill head into the hill, setting up with that it inches along like an inchworm, or like one of the tunnel boring machines. Now, the first version I did have a refinery on board so that it was chewing up the stone and sending that back to the refinery, which would then turn it into steel plate. It also laid down a conveyor behind itself. Now, that one I used sort of 4 pistons. Well, there was 2 like drive pistons inching forward, and then there was a set of 3 or 4 pistons which were linking back to the conveyor. So it was quite a complex setup, and I managed to get that working. It took a couple of goes, but I did manage to get it working and the drill head working well, and I got all the way into the hill. You know, I made a good sort of 100 meters in, so up this valley to where it became fully under the hill. Yeah, just for some reason it broke. It exploded on me, and I don't know why. I just guess I was pushing the physics engine too hard using the drills. Now, that was a spinning drill head, and I did try once to have like a solid drill head. I started off with that, and yeah, it was just too big, too heavy. One of the problems is the drill heads fill up with ore with the stone, so that causes all sorts of troubles. So yeah, this final version I work on now will have a spinning drill head. With that, it creates a round hole, of course. I need to put the deck across to create a level. Half the diameter of the hole will be sort of under the floor. So that floor, I'll just make a section of it 2 blocks deep that covers the whole width of the hole, and then I'll blueprint that, set it up on the projector so it projects in front of the drill head as it's moving, and have some welders on board that can take care of that. Now, I'm using merge blocks to grip the drill rig to the floor and have something to push off. I'm just sticking with a sort of single merge block type setup because previous versions I did have a conveyor system and also included connectors and the use of several landing gears, and just the forces involved, the landing gears were ripping off, and that was part of the problem with the one that blew up, is it just, the landing gears couldn't hold, they were just had too much force on them and they were breaking. So I've gone with the merge blocks and just using a single one, even though you see 2 on there. There'll be several of them, like there ends up being a line of 4 or 5 of them, I think, and it kind of acts as a center rail to keep the thing aligned, and as it welds one on the front, it will grind the one off the back. So I'm actually recycling those components through onboard very small conveyor system. The other thing that I'll end up with on board is an assembler, so I'll be using lots of steel to make this floor, and I can actually either put the steel plates in, but I can also just put iron ingots in there and produce steel plates that way, which is a more efficient way to transfer given my limited inventory. Again, one of the other hiccups that I came across was just with the merge blocks and just this initial setup, that it was sometimes making it a base. So when I tried to extend pistons, they wouldn't extend because it was a static grid, even though they were floating up in the air. Tried this method, I can't remember if it made any difference or not, of actually just placing the merge block on top and welding it. Just mention those components that I queued up. They are for a trading post acquisition contract. I'm pretty sure it's on camera that I go back over there later on in the episode. Back to the start of this construction. Now I'm just going with a couple of pistons here. One is going to push the drill head forward and then it will reverse, and the second one will push the whole drill rig, the whole machine forward. So just going with the 2 pistons working separately at separate times. So again, this was something that I was having trouble with. Managed to get it working, but it was causing me problems. So previously I had, say, 2 pistons, one pushing forward slowly while the other one was reversing back into position ready to push for the next push, and they would sort of swap. One would, you know, like you're walking a left and a right and a left and a right. Then on top of that I had another set of pistons going out the back, which were connected to the conveyor system. So they went slower again because there was 3 of them. So it was all different speeds, and yeah. So I've just put the rotor on there, and that's got a small head on it. So I have gone with the small drill heads. The reason for that is that they are less costly to make. The large grid drill heads consume a lot of components to make them. And then there's also the factor of how much stone they hold in their inventory. Yeah, the large grid ones just make it way too heavy when they're filled up with stone. Now this tyre that I'm putting on the rotor was meant to be a guide, so it sort of kept the machine straight when it was being pushed. They won't last, they will definitely be coming off. They were not required, but also I think were the cause of quite an interesting bug, which I will show you. I'm going to include it in the video, and that comes up in a few minutes, so I'll come back to that. But they weren't required either. The piston, it's only ever pushing like a block at a time, so I've kept it quite simple. It just goes a block and then resets, moves a block, resets. That's a much better way to do it. It doesn't have the big push and get the lateral forces like it did when there was 3 or 4 pistons involved. Now just put that grinder on the end there. Once again, this is not actually the final location for it because it did cause problems grinding off a merge block too close. So at the moment I'm working with 2 merge blocks, so as one gets welded on the front, one gets ground off the back. But what I actually end up doing is putting about 5 merge blocks on, and yeah, it doesn't actually make too much difference. It just makes it a bit more stable. Now this is the second piston, which acts as a push to reset the whole rig back to its start point. It uses a landing gear to grip onto the ground and push off. Once again, the forces involved, there are a couple of times where that landing gear actually got ripped off, even got broken a couple of times. And this is when I had other landing gears as well. I sort of put 3 on the back at one point. So when you see the finished product right at the end of the session, you'll see what I mean with that. But a lot of that was just to do with the timing that it was trying to latch on to the new merge block before it was really in position. So I just had to figure that out and get that right. And it goes pretty flawlessly now. You would see I've also popped in a cargo container there as well, which I sort of forgot when I first laid out these pistons. Now that container holds the steel plate which the welders are attached to for welding up the floor as it goes along. There's also components in there for about 4 or 5 merge blocks. It does recycle them of course, so that's not an issue. Now this setup here, before I have to restart, this is going to some small grid welders. Now the reason that I set them up this way was partly because of the cost of making the welders, but also just the positioning of them. More so that the large ones were too powerful and they were actually welding stuff that I really wasn't ready to weld. Although that was mainly to do with the fact that the projection went past one block in front of where it needed to be, because I had a whole pad that was about 12 blocks long. So just now having the projection which is 2 blocks wide, although there's only 1 block that ever shows up, it really just means that that doesn't weld too much. Because the problem that that was having is it was welding up and getting in the way of the spinning rotor, and it was causing that to stop and lock up. So this now is where calamity struck, and I was just adjusting this and then this happened. Everything just started floating away. I don't know what caused that, whether there's a maximum number of subgrids you could have. I mean, I hadn't even really put any weight on it this time. This is actually the second time it's happened. The first time it happened, I had all the welders attached to it. So there's a whole welder arm, and see, then they just drop and blow up. Yeah, the first time I had all welder arm attached. So I restarted and tried it again, and it didn't even get to that point. So I figured that the tyres on the rotor were probably the only unusual thing that I'd done. I decided that I would get rid of those and restart and have another sort of go at it. It was a bit bizarre. I tried to figure out what was wrong, but I just don't know. A little bit of deja vu, here we go again. Even though this is only the sort of second time you've seen me do this, this was actually about the 5th time that I'd started putting these conveyors in. So I got rid of the hinges that acted as a step down to small grid. I don't think that's what was causing it. I'm pretty sure it was those tyres and rotors. So they're there for now, but they won't last long, they'll go. Using the large grid welders isn't too much of a struggle. They don't have the issues that the large grid drill heads had. They're quite cheap to produce. They don't use an awful lot of components. Certainly more than the small grid, but not heaps. But also they don't hold a lot of stuff. You know, they don't get clogged up with stone or anything like that. The other thing that's quite good with them is they do have access ports on both the top and the side. So you actually sort of don't use as many conveyor blocks to make use of them, certainly in the setup that I'm using. And because of the range of them, I think they go out to like 2 meters or something. I'm only having to put them sort of every second block, so that works out quite well. Just putting a little bit of light on the situation now that it's starting to hit nightfall. Nice construction warning orange light. Some of my other versions of the templates that I used to weld the floor did have lights on them lining the access into the hill. Because the template or blueprint that I'm using here is only 2 blocks deep, it's just not really possible. So I've just gone with manually putting them in every sort of 6 blocks or so. Now, because I don't have this hooked up to a conveyor system, I need to maintain a stock of steel plates on there to take care of the floor. So I decided to put just a basic assembler on there to produce steel plates. Now, this means that I can just put in some raw iron ingots and it can produce it from there, because I can just jetpack over with a single inventory load in it, and that's enough for several thousand steel plates. Whereas if I did the steel plates individually, it would be a lot more loads than that because they are quite heavy. Speaking of steel plates, I did continue to run this rig after the end of the episode. I had some work to do on publishing some blueprints on the workshop, so I thought I'd do it in this game and then just have this ticking away in the background, and it's been making really good progress actually. It is eating up a lot of the steel plates, so I've still got a little bit more time up my sleeve. I've got several thousand left, but it is chewing them up, so I am going to have to make that a priority to get some more. Now that's either A, finding some iron, or hooking up somehow the stone that's in here, but I know where there's a whole heap of steel plates. There's about 25,000 of them sitting over on Treasure Island at that pirate base, and that 25,000 I'm referring to is just steel plates in the container, not even considering the actual structure of the building, which will have another few thousand in there. And just while I think of it, the other thing I did was talking about pirate plunder, is I've been disassembling magazines, because I had about 3,000 or 4,000 of those. Just huge amounts. I barely even shoot off 2 or 3 out of my gun, let alone thousands of magazines. And also, still just on pirates, you may have seen a few signals sort of flying overhead. That's a new mod that I've added in, which I'll talk about when the opportunity arises, because I'm pretty sure I did get on camera going and visiting 1 or 2 of those. It is hard to remember what I've done because I've recorded so much footage so many different times. It's hard to remember what version I'm in. Now you would have seen that I welded up the welders. They are rigid and attached to the main base structure. And I've just put in this arm here to provide a little bit of a foundation for the drills to go onto. More so, I just don't want something to catch and potentially break a single weld and causes the whole arm to collapse. So it's a little bit of just reinforcement. As I said earlier, using the small grid drills and just placing a little bit of a gap between them to make the most of the space. They're not going to travel too quick, and I just think it'll be a bit more advantageous to have it sort of more lightweight rather than more drills. It's going to go slow no matter what, and they will collect stone because unfortunately you can't sort of set them to have a destroy method like you do with the right click on the hand drill, which you can do with ship drills, but you kind of need to be in control of the ship. You can't set it up on the toolbar. What I mean by that is if you're in the control seat and the drills are on your grid, you can right click while you're in the control seat and they'll start running in destroy mode. But the only thing you can set up on the toolbar is either just have them on or off. And in this setup, because they're on a subgrid, the destroy doesn't work either, so I can't just sit in there and make it happen. I think that's really just a gap in the game mechanic. I don't know why it doesn't have that functionality that you can select either destroy or collect. The other thing is I'm not collecting. I don't have a conveyor system plumbed in. You can see I'm just using steel armor blocks to connect everything up, and I haven't got it plumbed in through the rotor because that did sort of clog up the system in one of my previous versions, so it's quite an intentional thing there that I've done. Now on the end of each of the arms I'm putting one of these drill heads which is going in a slightly different orientation, just around 90 degrees, to enable it to basically make sure that the arm doesn't get hooked up on the edge, because I found that happen a few times. And there's one of those space aerial pirate things, which I do go and have a look at. It's just not during night, so in the morning I think I do visit one in the flyer just to have a bit of a scope out. But yeah, the drill head, because I did have times where it was just catching the edge of the arm, and that was mainly to do with the arm sort of pushing too much ahead without it rotating, which isn't really an issue, but it does just, free the whole thing up. It's quite good actually having that little one on the end there. That's the main set of drill arms all sorted now. Now I'm working on the secondary ones. Because of the speed of the drill heads on the circumference of the circle versus the middle of the circle, means that I don't actually need to have so many drill heads in the middle because they're able to keep up. So I have these extra sets of drill heads on the outer arm, which enables it to keep up on the outer drill disc, which is going a lot quicker. Now it may look like I'm being very careful there to ensure that I've got the right gap, and I do indeed end up with the right gap. Unfortunately, I did miscount the drill heads and I am one short, but that will make itself apparent to me shortly. I also am going to put a brace on these as well. Again, just a little bit of extra reinforcement in case something goes wrong with one of the drill heads. The Achilles heel certainly is the rotor head itself, and that does cause me a bit of a problem, which I do have to do a little bit of an F5 reload, but I'll edit that out. Putting another one of these end drill heads on, and when I do actually start to bore out, that drill head does actually come in quite useful. It's quite niggly work this, and I do certainly burn through a few bottles of hydrogen to stay aloft, and this did take a very long time, so you probably will see sort of daylight hit soon, even though it might happen quite quick in the edit. I was at this for quite some time, and most of the next sort of segment of construction and programming of the time does take me a few hours in real world time. And it's just at this point here that I realise that I have miscounted the drill heads, but I do fix that. Yeah, so aside the fact from the failures that I've done this multiple times, even when I do get it right, it does take me sort of a good few hours. I've lost most of my Sunday doing this. So just give these drill heads a spin and start to clear out some of the rock so I can get the drill head reorientated. And this is where that extra sort of drill head on the end comes in quite useful, because once again, some of the previous versions I had to almost clear away all the rock for it to rotate. For this one, I'm not moving a lot really. Most of it is getting rid of the rock itself. So at this stage it just really indicates that I'm getting the setup right, because it's not getting caught on anything as such, apart from what I'm expecting it to get caught on, and it's just it's working. So now I'll skip ahead to when the drill arm's complete and sort of start to set up the timers, which most of it I'll do off camera because they just took absolutely forever to do, with the piston setup as well, to get everything in the right sort of cycle for it to work. You'll see the drill head rotating in the background. That's just clearing out its own space. I haven't got it moving yet, that's just why that's ticking away. These timers that I'm putting in here, I'm just putting a couple in the sort of static grid, which will be separate from the ones that are on the drill machine itself. Now this is kind of a safety check that I do for when I'm docking things, and it works quite well here actually. I'm just adding a small head to this hinge here so that I can put lots of little timers on, save a bit of space and a bit of resource. I think I ended up putting about 9 on, but just randomly I didn't know how many I was going to need, and I thought, yeah, 9 will do, and yeah, I think I just about used every one of them. So yeah, quite a complex sort of setup to get it working right. I'll talk more about those two separate timers, how they sort of act as a safety thing when I run through this mechanism actually working. It'll make more sense then. Now this sensor that I'm putting on here, this is the key to the whole thing that really makes it work where it didn't before, or whether it caused all sorts of issues. So this sensor is the main trigger for this whole setup restarting, and the benefit of that is if I have to slow down the piston, slow down the advance, I can just slow it down, and that's the trigger, the sensor. Whereas before I'd have to slow down the pistons and then slow down the timer response, and if it got stuck it would still push on with the whole program. Whereas now this is actually, the sensor is what triggers it. So also I can just stop the piston and stop the drill and the whole machine will stop working. It'll make a bit more sense when I go through the actual system working. And that can be what I'll do next, I think. I'll skip through all this programming of the timers and pistons and everything because it's very boring to watch. And we'll come back and we'll go through a run of the finished machine. Actually, just as an interlude, we'll go through that Space Pirate mod as well. So this is one of the first pirate transport ships to come through during the daylight. At least for this last lot of recording, I have gone and had a little bit of a scope out of quite a few of these different types of air transports that come through sort of every 10 or 15 minutes, and they take sort of about 10 minutes to fly overhead. So this is an addition to the modular encounters spawner by Lucas, and this one is called air traffic. So we have the ground occupation one, and this is the air traffic one. They don't come chasing after you, they just sort of float by up there, so you have to go chasing after them if you want them, which I haven't done. I've just sort of gone and had a bit of a scope out with a few of them, and it just adds a bit of life to the universe, because it can be quite empty sort of being by yourself in the sandbox game, so it's good to have some sort of stuff happening in the background. I am just taking a few pot shots at this one to see if I can take out a few of those turrets. It's got a few turrets on this one. Most of them are absolutely bristling with Gatling turrets and missile launchers, so quite a challenge to bring one of those down. This one though, I think actually if I can just take out those two big engines, it might just fall down by itself, whereas the other ones seem to have quite a few engines and backups and all sorts. Haven't really needed to actually get the resource out of this because I've still got everything sitting over at Treasure Island, and there is a ground occupation base quite nearby which I can take out at some point too. So, but yeah, that adds a little bit of interest to the background, and that was one of the modules of the modular encounter spawner by Lucas. So if you subscribe to that, make sure you give them the thumbs up. Okay, so here we are with the first on-camera run of the machine. I think I've had one cycle go through without a hitch, and just between you and me, I think about 2 cycles after this, the first cycle after I end the episode, it doesn't sort of work. The landing gear gave way again, but I do fix that, which I'll talk about next episode. So just jump into the control and turn the thing on. So that's a great thing. I just need to get the thing spinning and the drill on and the piston going again, and it'll just automatically kick back into life, because yeah, it all relies on the sensor. So I've got the actual sensor area showing, and it's not too far away from coming to the edge of it. So when this small subgrid gets out of the sensor range, that's when that sensor will trigger the timer to start everything else going. And we can't be too far away from that happening. And in fact, there we go now. So the first timer initiates these 2 external timers to my right to do the locking thing, and then it reverses the drill piston at a higher speed, and then we move this other piston forward and the grinder turns on. So that was those 2 timers there, and now that's locked in, and we've lost the merge block off the back. But the projector turns on, the welders kick in, and re-welds the one on the front. And there we go, we're ready to start again. And while that drill is going, the landing gear will unlock and that piston will go back to its pre-push position, ready to give it another shove next cycle. Now that welder didn't do that gap at the other side because there was a piece of scrap metal just getting in the way, and I think I ran out of steel as well, which is why that one hasn't finished welding. The other thing is I do actually need to make the platform a block wider. I think I again miscounted or something, so it has to be a little bit wider than what it is now, so I add another couple of blocks on at some later point, and I'll just manually turn on the projector and welder to finish off those gaps. As I mentioned, it will fail a cycle or two later. What happens is before the merge block has a chance to grip on, the previous merge block was ground out of the way, which I didn't think it would actually make any difference, but it did. And the force on the landing gear caused the landing gear to give way, and the weight that's in these drills just tipped the whole thing forward before that merge block had a chance to connect in. And the whole process is reliant on those merge blocks connecting, because when they're connected, that timer that's a part of the platform is able to set the other timers off on the movable drill, which is kind of a safety feature. The cycle can't continue on the movable drill until it's locked into place, which is something I've also done with aircraft when I have them automatically docking as maybe part of the autopilot, that until it actually makes a firm connection with the connector, it can't sort of turn its engines off and that sort of thing. No doubt I'll show you at some point when I inevitably set up that system. But the solution to prevent the landing gears ripping off the deck and the whole thing tipping forward, I tried first of all extra landing gears, but that didn't solve it, even though I had 3 locking it down. I guess that's just the forces that are involved. But in actual fact, it was just the merge blocks that I had to sort out and make sure that it didn't grind them too soon. So I actually just rotated that hinge around a bit. It's got the grinder on, and now it points backwards, so it doesn't connect to the deck, it doesn't connect to the landing gears, but it just floats above the merge blocks. And now at any one time I think there's 4 merge blocks along there, so now the whole rig slides along the top of the merge blocks, whereas I think before it was just grinding it away a little bit too early and it was sort of falling down and the weight was going in the wrong place. And since then it's really just continued drilling into the hill without a hitch, just autonomously. I will go over next episode first thing through the cycle again and just catch you up on all that stuff that I explained and went through, and just go through the drill cycle once more, which by the way takes about 9 minutes to go start to finish. But yeah, with that, a little bit of a different episode today, just the format of it. Just focused on one task and having a voiceover rather than sort of talking my way through it as I went. So just as we trail off, I thought that the next cycle when the thing falls over I didn't have on camera, but turns out I did. So have a watch of that. It's not very long because when it fails I pretty much hit F5. Thanks everybody for watching. Catch you next time. Stay safe out there.